Welcome back to this now. The South African business delegation presenting the country's just transition plan from fossil fuels to renewables at the UN's COP27 Climate Change Summit says that South Africa is one of the world's best resource endowments to help its transition. Now, let's get the latest from Sharm el-Sheikh Climate Change Conference. We now cross to SABC International News editor Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, earlier I was listening to your conversation with Eskom's CEO, Andre de Ruyter, and he was talking about, at the heart of the crisis that we are currently finding ourselves in is, of course, the old infrastructure and the need for more capacity, to the tune of 4 to 6 gigawatts. Who else do you have lined up there, and what do they have to say?
Yes, you are correct. Business from South Africa came in numbers here to ensure that they are part of the deliberations here, because you know that the issue of climate change is not only the issue of the environment, but the issue of the economy and the livelihoods, including the social activities. But looking at agriculture this time around, I have the ambassador from the AU, Ambassador Sako, who is going to speak to us about the impact of climate change on agriculture, because it does even lead to insecurity, particularly in the Sahel region. Good afternoon, Ambassador. Ambassador, quite an important summit, particularly when you look at issue of food production, but also the current challenges of food supplies since COVID-19 and also the war in Ukraine and also climate change.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to thank SABC for inviting me to share part of what Africa and our continent is going through the last 2 years since the COVID-19 pandemic and also the Russia and Ukraine crisis. So as we know that agriculture is the backbone of the African economy. So agriculture, the question you asked me, the relationship between agriculture sector and the climate change sector, they have two ways a relationship. On one hand, agriculture sector is vulnerable, is a very vulnerable sector to the impact of the climate change. On the other hand, is an important greenhouse gas emission. So this is the relation that we have in this sector. So it is important that we take measure, because the agriculture in Africa is a rain-fed agriculture. So we depend on the climate. So you cannot dissociate these two sectors. We need to address the issues of climate action through mitigation and adaptation. But for us in Africa, most important is adaptation, because climate change even came, this shock came before the COVID-19 pandemic. It was there with us, and it was really affecting 20% of our population don't have access to food. They are undernourished and malnutrition. They are suffering from malnutrition. So there is a need for us to really speed our ambition to tackle these issues of all different shocks. We have climate change, we have conflicts, we have recently the pests and diseases. We had the fall armyworm, and we have the desert locust in the Horn of Africa and some part of the southern Africa. And then also recently, in the past 2 years, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, and also on the other hand, the Russia and Ukraine crisis. During the pandemic, we learned a lesson that we need to change the narrative. We need to go food sovereignty on the continent. The time we wanted to import food from mostly rice from the Asian, our traditional market, we didn't have access because they restricted, they banned their exports. So that is a lesson for us with all the potential. So we need to unlock our potential. Africa has 60% of uncultivated arable land. Africa is a region that has the youngest population with very active human capital force to really address the issue of feeding Africa and feeding the world. We can be the breadbasket for the world if we want. We have rivers, we have water, good climate. It's just a matter of really leadership, or really defining our priority and stopping our imports. Because every year we import $45 billion annually on foods. Well, this money, we can invest it in inter-African trade, produce our food and do business and bring our youth back to this industry.
Looking at climate change, the Sahel region, the security there, it is not only linked to fighting for power or political power, it is also linked to climate change. Have you been able to look at that problem?
Yes, of course, we are looking for the problem, because the major problem is natural resources stress, because the shrinking of Lake Chad is really one of the cause of the Boko Haram in the Sahel region. So it is very important for us to really know that there is a link with the impact of the climate change on the resources, like a loss of biodiversity, land degradation, water stress. This is what is causing the transhumance and also the conflict between communities, the farmers and the elders. They are fighting for land, the communitary conflict. So the conflicts are not just political conflict on the continent. Climate change is another driver of really conflict. It's a multiplier of the conflict. That is why we really need to adapt. We really need to create a resilient food system on the continent so that we can mitigate the impact of climate change. Conflict, when it's political, we can address it through negotiation. But climate, we don't have in hand how to control it. But we know that when it's man-made, we can reduce our emissions. But we are not part of it in Africa. Our responsibility in the mission is only less than 4%. Yeah, but we are more vulnerable. So that is why, even though we want to go in a green economy for our development pathway, but we need to look at all these things so that we will not leave a bad planet to our future generation. It's very important, because we have even social stress, arrest that we have on the continent. All this is due to instability. If a community is stable, they have their own water, they have electricity, and they have food, there won't be all these crises that we are seeing in the continent. That is why climate and the peace nexus should be well addressed, and we are addressing it at the African Union Commission.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I just want to walk around here to show you. This is the South African pavilion. You can see that a number of people are standing here. I'm going to walk around and try and speak to the executive director of the Presidential Commission on Climate Change. I spoke to him earlier on, but I want to take him. It was very interesting what you said earlier on in terms of the just energy transition, Doctor. You are responsible. You are the director in the commission that was set up by the president to deal with issues of climate. The issue of just energy transition is very interesting. Can you repeat, particularly on issues, how we're going to handle this? Because people are saying it's going to lead to job losses.
Major shifts in the economy as we move out of some sectors. So, the sectors that are going to start declining, coal, fossil fuels, petrochemicals, these are at-risk sectors, even auto, internal combustion engine. But we're moving into new sectors. So a lot of the minerals for the future green economy, nickel, cobalt, manganese, even iron and steel and copper, they're going to play a big role. Nickel. There are other sectors, the electric vehicles, the build out of renewables and battery technology, green hydrogen. A lot of these sectors are going to be big job creators. In fact, in aggregate, more jobs are going to be created in the future green economy than are going to be lost in the old fossil fuel economy. But the question is how we move from the one to the other. And the people that are most at risk in that transition are workers, are communities linked to the coal mines, the power stations. These are the people that we've got to be actively supporting to transition. We've got to be putting the skills in place. We've got to be doing the economic diversification. We've got to make sure that SMMEs are supported. We need to be building the resilience of communities and giving them a place in that future economy.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I think we'll continue to get information as we go along. It is still a long way, the negotiations starting today. But I want to ask my colleague to perhaps capture what's happening right now at the South African pavilion. You can see that there are discussions and they are talking about green hydrogen, how we can use the green hydrogen. You know that Namibia received funding from developed countries to really go big on hydrogen. And I think there's a lot that we can talk about. But later at 6 o'clock, the Minister of Environmental Affairs will be here to launch this South African pavilion where many people are gathering and they want to understand where South Africa is currently in terms of moving from the fossil fuel to also ensuring that you don't lose jobs. And the issue of just energy transition, a real buzz, let me say phrase or words, you know, I think we'll get more tomorrow. Back to you, Unathi.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Very interesting there. Discussions and conversations at the COP27. Of course, that's where international news editor Sophie Mokoena is coming to us live at the Sharm el-Sheikh Climate Change Conference.